Okay, so I've done quite a bit more on this block now. I'm going to show you how you clear around the outlines that I've cut. So you can see these outlines here which I've cut like I showed you last time. I'm going to show you how you clear to those, and perhaps if you want to make those outlines slightly the lines slightly thinner, so there are some very fine lines in here and some somewhat coarser ones in here, how you take them from coarse outlines that I've just gone around with the lozenge graver, how I can thin them down as well, and also how I clear around them to ensure that I'm not going to actually damage those lines. So I use these tools, and if you see the end of that, you can see it's just flat on the bottom. Okay, so it's very lightly tapered with a square bottom. So if I get that in the light, reflecting the light, you can just see it's got a slight flat edge. Okay, these are called tint tools. They have different widths. This one is a slightly wider one, and you can see that edge there is quite a bit wider, and on that one you can see that it comes down to a square end. You can see that square end there. Okay, and these are good for clearing up to the line and also for clearing out the volumes around the line. Okay, and I just use one more tool for curves, and that one has a round bottom. Okay, so if I turn that over, you can see that there is no single flat edge there. It's got a round bottom, and you'd call that a round scorper. Okay. So I'm going to start with the tint tools and show you how to use them. Okay, so this is my relatively fine tint tool. It cuts a line like this, and that line is constant width no matter how deep I go, because the sides are almost parallel. So I'm going to, you can clear up to the line, so just not pushing very hard at all, just clearing out that little bit like that towards the line. This is how you're taught to do it traditionally, and it's a good clearing way, and it's a good way to start. You're less likely to damage the line, but I like to actually run along parallel to the line like this, and the advantage with that is you get a very clean finish. It takes a little bit of practice to get it right, so to begin with I would suggest that you clear up to the line like this, okay, and then you can, somewhere away from the line itself, you can start to clear out. So in general you're not clearing towards the line, you're not pushing a long way towards the line, because if it slips you'll go across the line, and that will end up producing unwanted marks and end up making the line look very unclean. So when you're doing most of your clearing, you're working parallel to or away from the lines. Okay. When you have a cleared area, what you want is for the edge of the line to be square. So you want it to end up on the block, you want it to end up looking like this. If I were to take a cross section of the line that I've been cutting, it looks like that. Okay, so this surface here is the surface that's going to take the ink, and then I brought it down about up to 1 millimetre below the surface, and it's got a nice clean square edge. It's not got an overhang. There's not a little bit of, it's not like this. Sometimes you see this. Okay, so that's where I've cut away using the lozenge graver to produce that edge, and I've not cleaned right the way up to the edge there. So if I were to come along here and clean that much, like that, if I get the shadow right, you can see there's a little bit of edge there still. So I need to clean that out entirely. Okay, even now there's a little bit of overhang. So I just need to come up and just clean that off. So you want the edge of the anything that you're clearing up to be really nice and square. Okay. The round bottom scorper is good for going into concave edges because it's round, so it clears nicely up to round edges like that. If I have very tight radii, then I have to use a round scorper rather than something like a tint tool to clear that out. Okay. So I clear round to begin with, like that, using one of them, both my fine tools. Or if I don't have a fine tool, then I can use the coarse tool and clear up to it with the coarse tool. This takes a lot more control because if you push too hard you run the risk of going across the line. Okay? So once I've got a region that's clear like that, then I can start to use a coarser tool and take out larger areas like this. And you want all of this surface that you've cleared to be nice and smooth and even. Any edges are likely to pick up the ink and produce blemishes when you print. Okay, so you're clearing with a fine tool to begin with, close to any lines that you've cut, and then you can use a coarse tool to clear out the larger areas away from those lines. But you're never working towards. You saw that as I was coming to this line, I stopped cutting that way and started cutting that way, so you're never working towards a line. And for this bit of clearing here, I will clear away from the line, so that if something goes wrong and if my tool slips, I'm not doing any damage to the image. Okay, there we go. That's good and clean. So let's say, okay, a little bit of a brush to clear out any rubbish. Let's say this line is a little bit too thick and I want to thin it down slightly. So I can come in with this tool and just follow it parallel, just gradually nibble away at the edge of it. I'm just going to take that out there. So I can gradually thin down the line by working parallel. It takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of control, but you can see ultimately I can make really quite nice, even, controlled lines that way. Okay, and these very fine ones that I've done down here, these are probably a tenth of a millimetre thick or so, these lines down here. They started off thicker and I've just gradually nibbled away at them to thin them down. It'd be very difficult to use the lozenge graver to make a line that thin to begin with, so you're much better off starting with a thicker line I'm just nibbling it down slightly with a tool like this. So again, this one is too thick because this isn't a form, this isn't an outline, this is more of a form line. So I really want it to be quite narrow. And it's also quite uneven, you can see. So I can just come in here and follow through like that. Just bring it down slightly. Okay. Okay, I'm happy with those lines now. I will ultimately clear this area away, but I'm currently undecided how I'm going to go from the transition from the white here with just form lines in it to a more tonal region in here. So this is the transition zone that I've got to, so I'm not going to fill that in yet. I'm going to start working down here now and putting in a lot more texture and detail in the foreground and building up so I can start to develop some tonal work in there as well. Okay, so I'm going to move here, I'll work up and then I'll resolve that intermediate zone once I've got there, once I've finished this part here. So that's enough for now, I think.